Thank you, Willie. What an honor to share a stage with this guy. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so, Chargers.
Okay, so I can stay.
Second, the basketball team at San Diego State. How many of you are following that? Are they unbelievable? Kawhi Leonard? Oh my God, you know, San Diego is really producing some athletes. So, what I'm going to do, this should be the most impactful lecture that you've ever heard on healthcare. Not because of me, but because of the material. If I don't do my job, you need to come tell me why I didn't do my job, because if it doesn't impact you, I need to know it so that I can modify my presentation to make sure that this message is getting across. And the message has to do not with surgery, although I am a cataract surgeon and a laser vision correction surgeon. Those certainly have their role in medicine. But if we want to impact healthcare in a measurable way that impacts the budget for Medicare, truly does healthcare reform, then our grandmother's advice still holds true. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so we're going to be talking about prevention. Now, and so our Creator said, let there be light. Well, not all light, unlike human beings who are created equally, light is not created equally. The rainbow is a good presentation of the spectrum of light. So light is not, you can actually measure the different wavelengths of light. And the rainbow shows you some different wavelengths. A prism will break up white light into its spectrum of different lights. The visible spectrum goes from the far end, which is ultraviolet light, which is measured in nanometers, these are very short wavelengths. They're very agitating wavelengths and very destructive. Ultraviolet, everybody knows, exposure to ultraviolet light leads to skin cancer. Now, fortunately, the ozone layer, if we keep it protected, filters out most of the UV light. There's a very small portion of UV light, about somewhere around 380 nanometers is where the ozone layer stops protecting us. 380 to 400 nanometers of blue light is a small spectrum. It gets through the atmosphere. That's the spectrum that the skin doctors are concerned with. That's the spectrum of light that we need to block with sunscreen, and to a certain extent, but a very small extent, through sunglasses. So when you hear doctors talking about you need UV filters for your glasses, they're talking about just a small fraction of UV light. It's even a smaller fraction than that, because the eyeball itself, unlike the skin, has a filter on the surface of it that filters out virtually 98% of the remaining ultraviolet light. So the two fields of eye care are optometry and ophthalmology. Ophthalmology, like myself, we're surgeons, medical doctors, that's what we concentrate on. Your optometrists concentrate on glasses, getting you better correction, that sort of thing. And so their concern, quite rightly, for many years has been making sure everybody protects that small amount of UV light that's getting through so that it doesn't damage your eye. Blue light is a short wavelength that is not filtered by the ozone layer, and it is not filtered by your eye. And you'll see that in a minute. It is from 400 nanometers to 500 nanometers. It is pervasive in our environment, and it is part of what we call the visible light spectrum, which is this spectrum in here, which we are all exposed to. what are the effects of blue light on vision? Blue light, like I said, is these small, short wavelengths. As you get to the greens and yellows of the visible spectrum, the wavelengths become longer, less agitated. But blue light increases light scatter inside the eye, and that's what you see as glare. It also obscures what we call edge discrimination, being able to see the fine edges of objects, which leads to less depth perception and decreased contrast sensitivity. Contrast sensitivity is the shades of gray. So if you come into the eye doctor's office and they measure your vision and they say you're 20/20, there are some people that can see a 20/20 line pretty well as long as it's black on white. That's a lot of contrast sensitivity. But as you go down in your shades of black to grays on white, it becomes more and more difficult to see. So some of the more sophisticated ways of testing vision, the true level of vision, is by presenting patients with various forms of contrast sensitivity to see how far down they can improve their vision. And then fatigue. The blue light tends to rapidly rotate inside the eye, and it makes it difficult for the eye to focus. And we'll get to that in a second. That leads to fatigue. So that all has to do with what we call visual performance. Glare, contrast sensitivity, being able to see depth perception, that sort of thing. That's just performance, okay? But the blue light, similar to UV blue light, UV wavelengths, but this goes through to the back of the eye, can also cause damage to the back of the eye, leading to such conditions as age-related macular degeneration. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not something that you have to run out of here and suddenly, be shading your eyes. But it does happen over a lifetime. When I said that this will be impactful to you, I'm also suggesting that this lecture should be impactful to your family, all the way down to the little ones. Because the little ones are really the ones that are more at risk than us. Most of us have looked around the room, have kind of been there, done that, and so you can't go back in time, but your young ones can start their lives correctly.
Hey, Doc, can you hold the microphone just a little?
Yeah. Is that better? Sorry. I need to repeat the whole lecture? Okay.
Just the last 5 minutes. So wait a minute. So should the kids, like our kids and grandkids, are you saying that not only should they be wearing sunglasses, they should be wearing more UV sensitive?
We're going to get to it.
Polaroid?
You're going to have to listen to the whole lecture. You're ahead of...
I didn't want to forget.
No, you won't. So, that blue light also contributes to memory loss, by the way.
Do you wear a hat?
So the blue light hazards. The obvious blue light, if you stare at the sun, everybody knows you're going to develop a blind spot. Well, the sun is almost solid blue light. So it's pervasive in the atmosphere. And it also is in all your iPads, your iPhones, your television screens, your computer screens, and your lighting above your offices, if they are either fluorescent or LED lights. It's all solid blue light. Man was made to be exposed to blue light, so not all blue light is bad. When you're outdoors, you should be being exposed to some blue light. However, man was also born into a culture where we didn't have light, and at night, when you go into your cave, you're supposed to shut down. And yet, what we're doing is we're creating an environment for ourselves that is unnatural. And like I said, this shows that the blue light goes through the eye and affects the back of the eye, the retina, which we'll get to in a second. The LED light revolution, the greening of America. And I'm pretty big on the greening of America, protecting the ozone layer, conservation, all of it should be. But unfortunately, these lights are terrible for us. And this is why. That blue light goes right through UVC, which is UV light waves at the C range, gets filtered out by the ozone layer. The UVA goes a little bit into the eye. The UVB light, very little, but the blue light goes right through. Macular degeneration risk factors. Smoking, it's a complex situation. It's on all blue light. So smoking can contribute. Blue light exposure contributes. Diet, obesity, high cholesterol level, these all contribute to deterioration of the retina. But they're, interestingly enough, what I'm going to draw out for you, there's a connection between blue light exposure, diet, obesity, high cholesterol levels. So this just is showing you what happens in visual performance and how light scatter from blue light ends up causing glare, blurred vision, decreased contrast sensitivity. The blue light is I'm not going to make you go through all of this, but blue light waves, white light comes into the eye, it's focused by the lens of the eye, and ideally that lens needs to focus on the very back of the eye. The blue light rays create so much scatter, it's called chromatic aberration in technical terms. It ends up inducing nearsightedness in us and causing blur. That's where the fatigue comes from. It's trying to compensate for the blur that is caused by blue light. And this is just another example of blue light scatter and disabling glare. And these are the typical visual complaints related to blue light. Need for brighter light when doing reading, unless you have cataracts, but there's an interrelationship there as well. Increasing a difficulty adapting to low light levels. In other words, what we call photo stress recovery. We go into a bright room and then you go into indoors, or you go outdoors, you come indoors, and it takes a while to recover. And those of us who, the longer it takes to recover from exposure to bright light, the less healthy the retina is. So it's one of the measures we do in ophthalmology. It's called photo stress recovery, testing how fast the recovery from bright light occurs. Increased blurriness of printed words, resulting in reduced reading speed. A decrease in the intensity or brightness of colors, haziness, and glare again. So, does anybody have any questions about the hazards and the impact of blue light and so forth? Yes?
Is wearing glasses when watching television, for example, since there's UAV and protection, does that help reduce this particular problem?
If you're wearing the glasses I have on.
Okay, and those are?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Yes?
Lowering the brightness of screens be good to do?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Should one lower the brightness of whether...
No, the brightness doesn't have much to do with it. It's the actual light wavelengths of the light. Yes? Just jump in. Just whoever. Go
You
ahead.
showed that those new light bulbs are bad.
Yes.
So the old-fashioned incandescent is the
They-
way to go?
Fortunately, Edison had it right. Was it Edison? Yeah, it was Edison. Well, actually, it was actually another guy that never got credit. The guy that the new electric cars made that. Yeah. At Tesla, right. Yes.
I just wonder with those new light bulbs, why didn't anyone come out? I've been following them.
I'm sorry?
Why didn't no association, no one came out that those blue light bulbs are bad? I mean,
Yeah, I know.
I mean, other reasons why.
Listen, this is a revelation for me. Let me give you a little history about me, because I'm unique among eye doctors. Willie introduced me, and you heard the word epidemiologist. He actually pronounced that pretty good. So that's what I did for 6 years. I worked at NIH and the National Cancer Institute before I ever went to medical school. I worked on the effects of radiation fallout from bombs in Utah during the 50s. And the field of epidemiology is studying what is the source of the cause of disease or illness. And that was really my passion in life, but I couldn't make a living at it. So I went back and went to medical school. Yes?
The effect of a bomb or watching a bomb, what does that do to your eye?
Well, I don't think your eyes are going to be so. We won't have too much time to worry about that.
First you see it, then you feel it.
It's probably solid blue light, so it's probably pretty impacted depending on the type of bomb. But I'm not an expert on the actual bombs. Anyway, so I did that. Then I went back to medical school because of my interest in epidemiology. I was interested in nutrition. I felt that medical schools but at that time there were no courses on nutrition. So I developed a nutrition course called the Brown Bag Luncheon on Nutrition at the University of Texas, and I'm proud to say it's still going today. It's the first nutrition course in the United States. And nutrition has a major impact, much more than we even can imagine, and we are just now getting to the tip of the iceberg. To make a longer story shorter, I went into eye care, but I continued to follow the epidemiologic literature on eye disease, particularly cataract and macular degeneration. And macular degeneration is a very frustrating condition. You know, cataract surgery is kind of mindless. I mean, it takes a lot of skill and eye-to-hand coordination of the surgeon, but you know, we get taught pretty well, and we're all pretty good at it. And we're plumbers. Basically, we take out the cataract, and the patient sees well, and they think we're gods. Yes.
When you have a cataract, the intraocular lens in there, you have a membrane holding it.
Yes.
That gets covered with some dust or something.
Yeah.
You have to have surgery for that then too.
Yes, you have to have a laser treatment for that.
Yeah.
That's correct.
I have put one
You
on.
have done, okay.
How about the other one?
So, at any rate, where was I? Diet. So basically, diet does have a big impact, and so I was following the literature and trying to find something that could help my mac-degen patients, because I felt like, you know, impotent at that. I had a lot of mac-degen patients coming in, and it's just a horrendous thing. Here we are extending life for humans way beyond maybe what was intended. And who wants to live life beyond the age of 70 if you can't see? I mean, it's just, you know, when the insurance companies rank the most important 2 doctors to seniors over the age of 70, well, I see a few of you over 70. Who are the 2 top ranked doctors? Who are the 2 most important doctors when you go to sign up for an insurance program? Eye doctor and heart doctor. You got it. I mean, it's obvious to all of you. They really didn't need to do a survey, but that's true. Number one, you don't really want to live without quality of life, which your heart and your eyes are critical. So, at any rate, I kept looking and looking, and I read the literature, and I started following these large epidemiologic studies that were being done. They started in the 80s with what's called the Blue Dam Eye Study out of Australia, and the Beaver Dam Eye Study here in the United States out of the University of Wisconsin, which led to a term you'll all probably be familiar with, which is ARIDS. Has everybody heard that term? ARIDS, it stands for Age-Related Eye Disease Study. It's a 10-year study done in the United States in the 90s and repeated, called ARIDS-2 from 2003, and the results were released in 2013. And that study, by the way, is very flawed, but that's a whole other topic. But in those studies, they came up with, there is a connection. We're not sure what it is, but there's a connection with nutrition and macular degeneration. Okay? There have been a plethora of studies done around the world just in the last 5 to 7 years that most eye doctors aren't following. They don't have that much interest in these small epidemiologic studies, but I've been following these. And there are profound implications, all of which underlie the information I'm giving you today. It's all proven, what I'm telling you. And so One of the foremost researchers is a guy named Billy Hammond. He's a professor at the University of Georgia. And he found that dietary carotenoids, particularly lutein and zeaxanthin, and now we even have a third one, which we'll get to in a minute, that's even more important, had a vast impact on visual performance. He did it on a study of the baseball players at the University of Georgia and showed that he could improve reaction times with nutrition. And we'll get to how that happens. By the way, that was the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2012. That's how recent a lot of this information is. Here's a Harvard Health letter. A plethora of studies, that's what I was trying to say, reveal links from working the night shift and exposure to blue light, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and obesity. My point about this being most impactful. If you work a night shift or use a lot of electronic devices at night, consider wearing blue blocking glasses. So there's one of your answers. Blue light and sleep deficiency. Light effects, this is Nature, which is a very respected journal. Doesn't just let any, snake oil salesman write articles in it. Light affects our circadian rhythms more powerfully than any drug. Blue light exposure after sunset signals daytime, delaying the onset of melatonin secretion. How many of you go and take melatonin to try to sleep better? You don't need to anymore. I'll tell you why in a minute. Yes?
The light emitted from television at night, watching that, how does that affect your sleeping?
It affects it. I'm going to show you exactly how.
Okay, thank you.
Unless it's black and white.
No, even if it's black and white. It has nothing to do with the actual color that you see on the television. So again, this is the Chicago Tribune. I'm just trying to say this is reaching the popular media now. Light from electronic screens at night linked to sleep loss.
Wow.
American Medical Association recognizes the problem with tablets and e-readers. Unlike TV, which also emits blue light, newer electronic screens are positioned close to our faces, increasing the intensity and effects of blue light. So reading in bed, how many of you read in bed with an iPad or what is it, iPad at night? Yeah. There you go. How many, those people that raise their hands, do you have restless sleep?
Yeah.
Yeah? You wake up like, a couple of times a night?
Yeah.
I mean, after the iPad or whatever the device is closed,
Yeah.
the effects are going to continue.
Absolutely. So consumers are using devices that emit blue light well into the night. 1 in 3 Americans, so I think some of you are lying. 1 in 3 Americans who use the internet own a tablet. 68% of them report taking the device to bed. Okay.
That explains it.
So I'm going to give all of us that are aging gracefully, yes?
Well, we just said the iPad too, right?
Yes, the iPad.
Kids with autism.
Oh my God,
They
kids on their
give them
video games
iPads.
and iPads and
Yeah,
using
that's
them
what
at
I'm saying.
night.
They give them iPads.
There's a lot of ADD
Yeah, I know.
that is being diagnosed that is all related to that.
iPhone, iPad,
iPhone, iPad, you got it. Any digital screen is all blue light. So they did a test of the effects of blue light. Oh! That's the effects. Sorry about that.
That's an effect of blue light.
Yeah.
And convert that to disk.
So they did a study. They had 3 groups of rats. The first one, they did nothing. They just watched them. They all 3 were fed the same diet. They didn't have access to. They had access to the same amount of food, and they ate the same amount of food. And that's going to be important in a second. Group 1, nothing happened. They just ate for like a couple of days, and they looked like this at the end of a couple of days. Group 2 had 16 hours of daylight and then 8 hours of complete darkness. They looked like this afterwards. And group 3 had 16 hours of daylight and then 8 hours in front of a standard laptop computer. This is that group. Interesting.
Well, that explains my weight gain.
That's
Yeah.
a weight gain, so we can not
I
have
told you
blue
this
light
is going
and
to be
then
impactful.
lose all the weight.
What's that?
We'll lose all the weight just with the glasses for the blue light.
That's right.
This is not Photoshop.
Now, this is hot off the press. Northwestern University, I'm talking about 2 weeks ago, published a study different than the rat study. Using a smartphone or tablet can make you fat. Blue light emitted by devices increases hunger. Now remember I said those rats had the same amount of food. It's not just eating a volume of food, but in addition to the effects of sleep and sleep effect, in the fat rat group we just saw, that was the effects of poor sleep that led to that weight gain, not the effects of the food. But in addition, exposure to light increases hunger levels for several hours. It even increases hunger levels just after a person has eaten a meal. It is not yet known why there is a link between blue light and hunger. This was 2 weeks ago.
Metabolism?
We don't know. But we know they did this study and they found that it increases hunger.
My 600-pound life.
There you go. So the health effects, let's go back to sleep deprivation. If you accept the hypothesis and what I think is fairly good proof that blue light is affecting our sleep cycles, then you can understand that as a result of not getting good sleep, we have increased heart rate variability, so risk of heart disease, decreased erection time, decreased reaction time. Now I'll really get you right. Decreased reaction time and accuracy, tremors, aches, growth suppression, obesity, diabetes, immune system problems, hallucinations, cognitive impairment. So, one little step for man, one giant step for mankind. So, at best, you have difficulty falling asleep, poor productivity at work, poor school performance, at worst, obesity, diabetes, depression, cancer, and blindness from macular degeneration. So now, to answer the questions that are all on your mind, how do you moderate the effects of blue light since it's pervasive? Well, there are 2 ways. There's internal controls inside your body, and there are external controls, namely blue filtering glasses, but we'll get to that in a minute. So let's look inside the eye. If you look at the back of the eye, which all eye doctors do when you go to see them in their clinics, they see in the back of the eye the optic nerve, which is the big nerve. It's the bundle, it's the cable bundle that takes from the sensors in the retina. It picks up the images and takes it to the brain. Those images are collected by a set of what we call photoreceptors, which are concentrated in an area of the eye which is densely pigmented, and it's called the macula. Most of you have heard of macula. Macular degeneration is when that macula deteriorates. That's your central vision. That's why macular degeneration patients are not 100% blind, but they're functionally blind. They have peripheral vision, but they can't see anything in front of them. So imagine trying to you can't read, you can't see faces, you can see enough to get around, but you can't really enjoy life. Now, if you take a cross-section through that, this is what the macula looks like. It actually has a crater, and the deeper the crater, the better that macula is. So this is a normal macula, and if you see this yellow substance here, everybody see this yellow substance? That's a blue light filter that you have in your eye. The doctor, when he looks in the back of your eye, cannot see this. He can't measure it. He has no idea how much of that filter is present. Yes?
Even with optomaps?
Even with optomaps. That's a good one. Where'd you get did you have an optomap done?
Like 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Optomaps won't pick that up. my fundus photography won't pick it up. The newest technology called OCT, which is like an ultrasound, which gives us an actual image that looks like this, which helps us look at macular degeneration. These little bumps here is someone who has a little bit of macular degeneration. I can see that and say, yep, he's got macular degeneration. Most likely from having a low level of filtration here from blue light, which damages the back. But I can't see this with the OCT. But we do have a way of measuring it, which I'll get to in a minute. Yes?
What's that test they give? Like, they put some orange stuff in your eye? The test they give.
Orange stuff in your eye?
Yeah.
That's a pressure test.
Oh, that's what it's for?
Yeah, that's for glaucoma.
Yeah,
Has nothing related to this. Yeah. Man is not born with that yellow filter. This is why children are so important in this discussion. We're not born with that filter. That filter is made up of 3 vegetable materials called carotenoids. We mentioned them before. Zeaxanthin, lutein, and a new one that was discovered in the last 10 years called mesozeaxanthin, which we'll get to in a second because it's the most important one. And you're not hearing that on the ads that Bausch & Lomb is putting on TV because their product doesn't have any mesozeaxanthin. Now, these are the different kinds of carotenoids that we get from all these different plants. A child is born without a yellow blue blocker filter inside the eye. When he starts with mother's milk, this starts to accumulate in the back of the eye. They come from plants, and this is what's called the energy transfer, or what we all know as photosynthesis. This is how plants survive. They have photosynthesis. And lutein and zeaxanthin carry a lot of oxygen. They're molecular. I want you to memorize this and have this for me. If you don't, I'm a failure. So anyway, these are the molecular structures of lutein, zeaxanthin, and mesozeaxanthin. They're very similar. They just have slight differences, but the important part of the molecular structure right here is the hydroxyl component, which is the OH right here and right here. That's carrying a lot of oxygen, which the plant needs. When the body absorbs these molecules from nutrients, they go to the most oxygen necessary parts of the body. And the 2 most oxygen necessary parts of the body are the eye, the back of the eye, the retina specifically, and the brain. Now remember, the eye is an extension of the brain. So we're going to now start to draw a correlation between how much of these nutrients you get in the back of the eye, in that area, and how much your brain is getting of these same nutrients, which are also important. This is just a slide to point out mesozeaxanthin, which I've been mentioning, is a very important, one of the 3, but it's the most important. Remember that dip in the macula? Well, this mesozeaxanthin is right in the center. It's the most prominent nutrient in the center. Now, some of you may be familiar with the fact that macular degeneration runs in families. And they're doing a lot of genetic studying to try to figure out how can we screen for macular degeneration in families. In fact, I was a principal investigator for Sequenome, which is a San Diego-based company, trying to come up with a new screening test for families. And the reason they included me in this was because I had a hypothesis that mesozeaxanthin was more important than lutein and zeaxanthin. And the reason it's more important for the genetics is because mesozeaxanthin you do not get from your diet. You cannot go out and eat, unless you eat turtle shells or, rooster, what do you call it? Yeah, rooster cones. It's not present in our diet. It is what's called a metabolite. Your body takes in lutein, and if you are capable of inside your body of absorbing that lutein and metabolizing it, it converts to mesozeaxanthin inside the eye And that's the central, most important protection for the eye. So my hypothesis was, and I think it's going to prove to be true, is that the families that have these genetic deficiencies have an inability to convert lutein to mesothelioma. Yes.
Mesothelioma can be absorbed in the body if you give it to somebody.
Yes. If you take it, you can. That's very perceptive. That's what I'm going to recommend here in the end. We don't know if you are susceptible or not, or if your family is susceptible. We can't tell whether, at this point in time, we do not have the ability to test you and say, oh, you're converting to mesothelioma. So you can't just depend on your diet. It is true that most vegetarians that eat a lot of green vegetables have a very thick internal filtration of blue light. But there are some that don't, and I've seen them in my office, and it's always puzzled me. If they're eating all these carotenoids, why don't they have more of this substance? And probably because they have some type of family tendency to not convert it. So the effects of carotenoids, taking something internally, remember, it increases what we call that yellow layer that I showed you a minute ago. We call it the macular protective pigment. So when you filter out blue light inside the eye, you have visual protection and you have visual performance, both. You have visual function, which is the eyeball not processing, the eyeball is like a camera. It takes a picture of what you see. Then it sends it to the brain, in the back of the brain, called the occipital cortex. And so when you take a lot of carotenoids, you improve your ability to take better pictures. But in addition, we now know that the more of those substances you take, the higher the concentration is in the brain, and the better your processing, which means you not only take the picture better, but when it gets to the brain, your brain, like an editor in a film studio, processes it better so that you interpret those images better. So this is just a summary of why it protects you from disease, and that is because it absorbs the short wavelength blue light. These carotenoids absorb the blue light, that's what we talked a lot about. But those nutrients, in addition to absorbing the blue light, also act as an antioxidant inside the eye, an anti-inflammatory inside the eye, and what's called membrane stabilization, which is very important in the brain. So again, we're absorption of the blue light. That increases your range of vision. It filters out what we call the blue haze horizon. This concentration of blue light in the atmosphere is why golfers lose their golf balls. So now we get into the sports vision. Because it can also be that you don't have good vision, or you need better glasses, or you have cataracts and all that, but even people with 20/20 perfect vision lose their golf balls if they hit them far enough. So I never lose mine. So at any rate, and what it does is that white ball just drops into this cluster of short wavelength blue light, and just, you know how you're following it, and all of a sudden, where'd it go? That's blue light haze. It improves contrast sensitivity because it improves the edge discrimination of objects, and it reduces scatter inside the eye. And I know a lot of this is redundant, but I want to make sure the message is getting across. Now, University of Wisconsin, Julie Morris, who's a nutritionist, PhD at University of Wisconsin, did a fabulous study. I only got 5 minutes?
5 to 7.
The brain is connected to this because they did an autopsy study. They found the more of that blue light filtration substance called the macular protective pigment that you have in the back of your eye, the more the brain has. So when an eye doctor is able to measure how much you have there, it also measures how much you have inside your brain. And that's important because we now know that the occipital cortex, which is your visual processor, improves, this is a big word, but it improves your ability to process all the images. But it also, the more you have in your eye, the more you have in your frontal cortex, which increases your cognitive ability. And that has to do with that term I used a minute ago called membrane stabilization. So we now know that the more pigment you have in that back of the eye, the better your visual processing is in the brain, and the better your cognitive thinking is. So in a sense, what we have inside our eye, in addition to antioxidation properties, we have what we call strong internal sunglasses. Now, we're going to switch this was what I've been talking about is internal. Now it's external. How can we do this? And by the way, you can take a supplement, and there's brochures at our table on the types of supplements that you need to take. You can take supplements and within 6 months increase your macular pigment to its absolute best threshold. We also have the ability in our office to measure how much you have so that if you already have enough, you don't need to be taking anything. Or if you decide to go to Costco or you go to Henry's and you take a substance, we can measure you in 3 to 6 months and say, you're wasting your money, it's not healthy. The FDA does not control these supplements. So some of these places, they use poor raw materials or they exaggerate claims on their brochures. You need to be able to validate it, that whatever you're taking is actually making it to your body and being useful. So at any rate, the sunglasses we all know how to measure. Sunglasses, the reason, how many of you are sharpshooters or skeet shooters or use blue light? You use blue filters, right? Most of them do. And the reason is because, the reason that yellow blue blocker lights work is all the things that I talked about in terms of depth perception, reducing blue light from the haze, and sharper vision. And however, most blue lights end up discoloring the atmosphere. And there's a lot of lawsuits out about blue blocker sunglasses reducing the ability to discriminate on traffic lights, leading to higher accidents. So just wearing blue blocker sunglasses is not the answer either. And so that leads us to what's a new invention called OLP, ocular lens pigment, that has been embedded in certain lenses. And there's a brochure on my table that's called Blue Tech lenses that's the best in my opinion, but there are others on the market that actually make glasses so that it doesn't distort your vision, it doesn't reduce your color discrimination, it filters out the right amount of blue light and protects your eye. So this is the first eyewear with real medical benefit, in my opinion. I have not spent my career, even though I have an optical shop, telling people they needed to have UV protection. Because I knew differently. I knew that the eye and the ozone layer filters out 99.9% of UV light. When you get in your car, the rest of it is filtered out by your windshield. But this is a real medical benefit. And so the ocular lens pigment filters blue light and lessens glare without altering color perception. In addition, they make these lenses, hold on a second, let me just get through my, they make these lenses in outdoor lenses and indoor. I'm wearing indoor right now. I invite you all to come to the table, see what the indoors look like. The reason I wear them is not that all blue light is bad, but I sit in front of a computer terminal all day long. You know, I've already beat that to death. So the outdoor lenses, with most polarized lenses, you get, you can get poorly made polarized lenses, and most polarized lenses, you have an inability to look at digital devices, which we're all using, right? Our iPhones, digital, car screens, and so you can see people at the pool with their polarized sunglasses taking them off to try to read, because they're reading on an iPad. These lenses have a polarization which does not distort digital images. And so who needs these types of lenses? Here's the ones that I listed, but virtually everybody. Virtually everybody. Post-cataract is very important, and the reason that's important is because the natural lens of the eye is, when it develops a cataract, what is it doing? It's yellow. It's filtering out blue light. Our Creator said, as we age, I need to protect that retina. It's being threatened. And we can discuss the science of it. There's more science than just that. But basically, our Creator said, built in a body system which basically starts trying to protect from blue light. And that's how you develop cataracts. I.e., what if we're able to do this early in life? Would we stop the production of cataracts? Would we stop macular degeneration? If we cut out cataracts and macular degeneration out of the federal budget and Medicare dollars, we don't need Obamacare.
Yay!
And here's another this is hot off the price, hot off the press. There's a rumor of another study linking blue light to erectile dysfunction.
Say what?
Now that I get your attention. And the treatment is a little blue end. That was a joke. Okay. So I'm going to kind of stop here. I have a whole other 5 or 10 minutes on the relationship. I'll just summarize it. There's a relationship, in my opinion, between macular degeneration, cataracts, blue light, nutrition. It all interconnects. And I think science is starting to prove that. So with that, I'll let you ask questions. Yes?
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful, great presentation.
Thank you.
One question. What would you suggest we do if I have macular pucker?
Macular pucker is a condition, for those of you, macular pucker is a condition where you develop this wrinkling, this little filament on the back of the macula. We don't know why. Some people get it. Trauma is related to it.
Can't hear you.
Trauma is related to getting a macular pucker. Technically, I don't know. Well, it doesn't mean that because you had trauma, but we do know that people that get hit in the eye or that, have some other trauma to the eye can develop macular pucker more than other people. But there are a lot of people that develop macular pucker, and we don't even know why. It seems to be associated a little bit with people that have high blood pressure. At any rate, the short answer to your question is, I would encourage you to do everything to protect your eye from blue light, because we don't know that it directly relates to the macular pucker, and it won't correct it, if that was your question. But it's important, since you have dysfunction in the back of your eye, it's even more important that you protect it. Yes?
Paul Harvey used to advertise a product for macular degeneration, and he had testimonies that people that were practically blind, their eyes would come back.
I can't comment. I mean, I don't know of anything like that. But Paul Harvey, I like it. I think it's a good salesman.
What about the rest? They're no longer alive.